245, Chapter 26 of Dracula. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from the shores of the Potomac in Virginia, the Old Dominion. Episode 245, The Game's Afoot. This week's episode is brought to you by Knit Circus, the e-newsletter that can arrive in your mailbox delivering 3 rings of knitting, sewing, and fun. You can sign up at www.knitcircus.com. Also, Cool for Cats, the new novel by Andrew C. Ordover. You can get it at amazon.com or find out more from the link in the show notes. And you can find out all about the various ways to listen to CraftLit by visiting craftlit.com and looking at the links in the sidebar of the show notes. Well, hello! I am about to go through horrible withdrawals. This is our second to the last Dracula episode. I know, right? The horror. It's really awful. I'm really actually having a very difficult time with this. But I will be strong. I promise. That means that there will really only be 2 episodes of CraftLit during the month of March 2012. It will be this week, the 2nd, and next week, the 9th. Then I will take the rest of March and probably the first week of April, because that's spring break and we have all sorts of things planned here. I will be working on Gulliver's Travels. Now, just because CraftLit won't be broadcasting doesn't mean work isn't happening. There will be new things posted on the mamaoknits.com blog. There will be patterns going up and things going out and all sorts of excitement, including, yes indeed, a special sock pattern being released for the opening of the Hunger Games movie. That's right, you can have a pair of socks that Katniss would love too. So yes, all sorts of things will be happening, and all of that will be done behind the scenes. Aaron Ziegler will be recording. I will be plotting and planning and researching. I actually had, those big, ginormous canvas bags. Trader Joe's started selling them again, and I think the New Yorker had them for a while, and LL Bean had them, these big 2-tone canvas bags that look like they belong in on a beach in Nantucket. I have 2 of those full of books and reference material on Gulliver's Travels that I picked up from our local library. So I have my work cut out for me. But it's work that is good and I am excited by. And even if I'm not podcasting, doesn't mean you can't donate to the show. I still have to pay for the audio feed even when I'm not posting new episodes. So just throwing that out there. I hope your week was a good one. Mine actually turned out to have been quite good. I had an interesting conversation this morning online with Meg, who designed the Game of Thrones gauntlets. I've lost feeling in my 3 fingers on my left hand. My pinky finger, my ring finger, and my middle finger. They started tingling, like they were falling asleep, and now I can't feel the tips of them, and the side of my hand is kind of dead too. She said it's my ulnar nerve, that because I sit here typing or driving, which are the 2 things I do most, the nerve has shortened and needs to be stretched. So I went to the door jamb and I stretched my arm, and I went, wow, yeah, I guess it was the ulnar nerve, because that really went zowie. So I will be stretching. You won't be able to see me, but I will be stretching while I am podcasting. And that's useful information. If the feeling starts to go in the 3 fingers on the far 3 fingers on your hand, go stretch your arm and open up at the elbow joint is my understanding. Useful safety tip. Don't cross the streams. Stretch your elbow. There we go. My work here is done. Now, the month of March also brings some excitement for me. On the 20th, which is a Tuesday and the first day of spring, I will be teaching with the good people at Needles in the Haymarket at Haymarket, Virginia. It's a shop, and they're renting like a room above a restaurant so we can eat and relax and have a good time. And I'll be teaching all day there. And then in September, I will be teaching for the Hand Knitters Guild of North Central Texas with the awesome acronym HKGNCT, which kind of terrifies me. It's even more complicated than WWMDFK. So I will be teaching, I can't remember if they said that the classes are already full, but I'll be teaching my sock heel class and the special cast on for the Pivotar socks and a double knitting class on my scarf that came out in the Knitting Scarves from Around the World. So I am very excited. You've heard, if you've been listening to Cast On, you heard Brenda talk about the Sherman heel, and I was so excited to hear other people talking about this. This is one of the sock heels that I used in the Sock Heels A Go-Go class at the very first Sock Summit. It is, in all ways, a perfect sock heel. If you've never been able to get short row heels to work for you, this is how to do it. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to be able to teach the full 6-hour class again because it's hard to do pieces of it. It's really, really nice to have the time to do all of the sock heels. If you have a guild or a store that wants people to come and teach from outside the local area, I now have a classes page that details all of the classes I can teach, what the homework might be before those classes, and has all that information that you might ever need available from a link in the show notes. Now, I do have an announcement for those of you in the larger Hood River, Oregon area. Yvonne had contacted me a while ago and asked me if I would let you all know about this. The second annual Columbia Gorge Fiber Festival will be held April 20th through the 22nd in Hood River, Oregon. Gorgeous! It is hosting over 40 vendors carrying everything from raw fleeces to hand-painted yarn and everything else in between. There are several workshops available from such notable instructors as Mary Scott Huff, Chrissy Gardner, yay! Judy Becker, yay! And more. For more information, please check out CGFF, that's Columbia Gorge Fiber Festival, cgff.lavendersheep.com. And Lavender Sheep is spelled exactly as you think, and it's smashed together as one word. And there will be a link to that from the show notes for you as well. So I hope you guys can go. I want to go. Oregon's gorgeous. I have friends who live in the Dalles, and their wedding. How romantic. The Columbia River Gorge. Not bad. I think that's it. There really hasn't been a lot of craftiness. Still working away a little on the Map of the World Afghan. Just kind of poking along. And I am working on my Hunger Games socks, which I am so excited about. It's a very, very different construction. And as with all patterns I put out, if I do anything that's out of the ordinary, I make sure that you have pictures and instructions for all of the bits and pieces, because it's no fun if you have to keep going and looking somewhere. I either link to it or I explain it myself. So all of that will be in the Hunger Games sock, which will be coming out, I think, what is it, the 23rd is when the movie is released? So exciting. And that's one day before I get to take the boys to see the Mythbusters in concert, I guess. It's like a live touring show. I assume they're just going to blow things up. So, big fun for the boys. There will be much explodingness, I think. And then the last bit of newsness is our winners from our incentive drawing for the month of February. We have Misty, who has won Caramel, and Heather, another Heather, who has won an embroidery kit from Mighty Distractable. My boys love the embroidery kits. They look at them and they giggle because the Mighty Distractable website, which is near and dear to my heart and my boys' heart, if only for the masthead, which is mighty distractible. And then it says, ooh, shiny, which is totally how my boys and I are. You know, it's distracted by shiny objects? Absolutely. And then we go and we think about them for a while and forget what we were doing. And that's our world. So Misty and Heather, you know who you are. You don't have addresses linked on your PayPal account, so I can't actually see what state you are from. But you donated to CraftLit during the month of February, and you therefore were put in the running and won for the pound of caramel and the embroidery kit. I will be contacting you directly via your email address to make arrangements for delivery. I'm so excited. I love giving stuff away. It's fun. And even more fun when it's really good stuff. I love that. But enough with the giving, enough with the generosity, enough with the donating, enough with the love, because now it is time for fear. It is time for Dracula. What am I going to do when it's Gulliver's Travels? There are no funny sound effects for Gulliver's Travels. Wow, I hadn't thought about that. I've really set myself up for a huge letdown, haven't I? The pain, the anguish. Someone is going to email me, I know it, or post something in the show notes with a very funny idea for sound effects for Gulliver. I know for the fourth book, there are 4 books, or 4 sections. I know for the fourth voyage, the fourth one, that there's definitely a sound that I could use. Although the Huinum might not feel that that's such a great idea. I don't know. I will be pondering it as I research. But Dracula today, chapter 26. There isn't a whole lot for me to go over with you. You're going to hear from everyone. It's another one of those chapters where everybody throws their 2 cents in. And it's because our fearless adventurers are on the move because the game is afoot. Dracula is moving. I have put our map from Siri James, the author. I have put the map back onto the show notes because you still may want to look at it. I don't know. And Dracula, it's been very interesting to me because the annotations in the book, the book that I'm primarily using, the annotations in the book are very critical of Bram Stoker's creative license, as it were, with actual terrain or timetables for the trains, because he's treating it like it's a work of nonfiction instead of a work of fiction. And so fine. I read the annotations and say, okay, well, that's fine. And to me, what's interesting is not where Stoker strayed from reality, like where rivers are. But what I think is extraordinary, because I do think of this book as a work of fiction, is how he was able to craft a plausible chase scene over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. And it occurred to me that the things that I've been saying have been mistakes, like the searchers, the travelers contradicting things that they know or they should know or they have known about Dracula, and the way that he works, his mythology, what his mythology restricts him to. Can he cross water? Can't he cross water? Can he turn into a wolf? Can't he turn into a wolf? Can he control Mina? Can he not control Mina? These are things that seem to alter themselves at different points in the narrative. And it occurred to me that what this means is that the book is far more like real life. I think about it for a minute. How many of us have ever held an opinion, not a fact, an opinion in our head, unchanged for more than a month? The world imposes itself on us all the time. And the more you learn and the more you know, the more nuanced your understanding or awareness of a situation or an idea become. And if you aren't doing that, then you're dying. it's not healthy for the human brain not to grow. And growth implies change, and change is scary, but it is also what keeps us alive. It's why you're supposed to do things like play Sudoku and words with friends and stuff like that. It's good to challenge yourself. It occurred to me that the things that I've been critical of, and certainly things that the book is critical of, aren't so much indications of a weakness of the writing as they are indications of the humanity of the characters. And in a book that is purportedly a piece of horror fiction, having desperately human main characters is so very important. And yes, you will still hear some of the melodrama that we've been hearing in these last few chapters. And it makes perfect sense when you remember when Stoker was writing. It makes absolutely perfect sense that he would start to allow, especially Mina, but all of the characters, to become a bit overwrought in these final chapters. It is what his audience would expect. And if we allow ourselves to get swept up by it, it's what we want. That heightened reality. I mean, there's nothing more melodramatic in what he does here than what you would get in, a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. The asteroid is about to smash into the world. I'll save you. No, you can't. Don't leave me. I have to. I must. I must pay you can't pay the rent. I'll pay the rent. It's the same thing. It's just maybe the language is a little bit more modern in the Jerry Bruckheimer films, and so we don't notice it as being, or we do notice it as being overwrought, and we don't like those movies either. It's human nature. It's human frailty, and I think it's important to respect that, because when you not you, you're better. No, I'm talking about those other people. When those other people divorce themselves from emotion and are only left with kind of a cold, calculating, stoical nature, it's exhausting. I don't know if you've ever met anyone who's an actual stoic, someone who really tries very hard to live their life by the dictates of logic and reason. The people who I've met who are like that are perhaps the most exhausted people on the planet, because it's work. It's a really hard work. And while I don't know that you should make, financial decisions based on emotion, that might cause you some trouble. Certainly, we are given emotion for a reason, right? I mean, love is so strong and so important. We were watching A Wrinkle in Time yesterday, which was a mini-series that I loathed. But the boys have read the book, and Thing 2 needed something to watch. Well, if you've read A Wrinkle in Time and you remember the story arc, it all comes down, as most of Madeleine L'Engle's books do, to a fight between good and evil. Not unlike what we see here in Dracula. Fine, good and evil. Great. Well, how do you personify good? How do you give good an action? Because good is dangerously close to weak in a lot of people's minds. How do you activate good? Well, the way Madeleine L'Engle does it mostly is through love. And that could either be love between two people, or it could be God's love for us. And she works it both ways. She was quite an interesting person, much less writer. I have family members who used to go to the same church as her, the Church of St. John the Divine in New York City, which if you've never been to, when you go to New York, go take a look. It is a really interesting church. Anyway, Madeleine L'Engle, Wrinkle in Time, love. You will find resonances of Dracula in Wrinkle in Time. You will find those kinds of paradigms, those thought paradigms of love conquering evil, of love overwhelming all the odds. You find that in Dracula, you find that in Wrinkle in Time, you find that in most good and evil literature. It always comes back to love. And love is an emotion. And my husband there's a reason why I brought this up. My husband just finished reading a book. I will have to find out the name of it for you. Pooh. It'll be in the show notes. I have to get that information. Anyway, one of the things it talked about in this book was how we talk about making logical decisions. Purely logical decisions. If you would just think rationally about this, blah, 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 blah. And it turns out that no one ever makes a decision based purely on logic. Because that would be a really scary decision. Logic that's not tempered with our emotion, our love, our history, our personality, our value system. Those decisions can be really scary. And it had never occurred to me before. And they did like the neurological study. They figured out how is the human brain processing this information in order to make decisions. And the best decisions are never purely logical. Interesting, no? So we can disparage melodrama all we want. And by the way, I will be the first in line because I really find melodrama to be quite silly. But to deny it, to deny the need for that kind of emotional arc, to say that E.T. is any less of a movie because Steven Spielberg can make you cry on cue is kind of missing the point. Dracula is interesting, of course, because this beast, this creature, there is nothing remotely lovable about him, right? And there's nothing remotely human about him. And yet, it is impossible not to sense that he is an emotional creature. That speech, which Aaron Ziegler did a brilliant job at, I think. The speech that he gives when Mina is drinking his blood and he's sneering at the men, talking about how, he's finally going to have his revenge on them. What did they ever do to him? Nothing. But who's he really revenging on? The human race. Because the dude's bitter. Evidently, he didn't really want to be a vampire. I know you're shocked. I am too. But this is what makes him a great villain. He's remorseless. He's very smart. He's uber strong. He's a scary dude. But he seems to have some sort of emotional core. Now, Francis Ford Coppola, in his movie, went to extremes with that. Don't expect Stoker to go there. But right now, Dracula is a hunted animal. And this entire chapter is about that noose slowly tightening around his neck. Now, the thing with Dracula, of course, is he's been able to slip out of that noose every other time they've set it for him. So, we've got 2 chapters left. Today's the noose tightening, and next week is either the hunters win or Dracula wins. And it is that simple. So today, we have John Scholes, we have Aaron Ziegler, and we have Elizabeth Klett bringing to life the penultimate chapter of Dracula.
Dr. Seward's Diary, 29 October. This is written in the train from Varna to Galatz. Last night we all assembled a little before the time of sunset. Each of us had done his work as well as he could. So far as thought and endeavor and opportunity go, we are prepared for the whole of our journey and for our work when we get to Galatz. When the usual time came round, Mrs. Harker prepared herself for her hypnotic effort, and after a long and more serious effort on the part of Van Helsing than has been usually necessary, she sank into the trance. Usually she speaks on a hint, but this time the professor had to ask her questions, and to ask them pretty resolutely before we could learn anything. At last, her answer came. I can see nothing. We are still. There are no waves lapping, but only a steady swirl of water softly running against the hawser. I can hear men's voices calling, near and far, and the roll and creak of oars in the rowlocks. A gun is fired somewhere. The echo of it seems far away. There is tramping of feet overhead, and ropes and chains are dragged along. What is this? There is a gleam of light. I can feel the air blowing upon me. Here she stopped. She had risen as if impulsively from where she lay on the sofa and raised both her hands palms upward as if lifting a weight. Van Helsing and I looked at each other with understanding. Quincy raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at her intently, whilst Harker's hand instinctively closed around the hilt of his kukri. There was a long pause. We all knew that the time when she could speak was passing, but we felt that it was useless to say anything. Suddenly she sat up, and as she opened her eyes, said sweetly, "Would none of you like a cup of tea? You must all be so tired." We could only make her happy, and so acquiesced. She bustled off to get tea. When she had gone, Van Helsing said, "You see, my friends, he is close to land. He has left his earthen chest, but he has yet to get on shore. In the night he may lie hidden somewhere, but if he be not carried on shore, or if the ship do not touch it, he cannot achieve the land. In such case he can, if it be in the night, change his form and jump or fly on shore. Then, unless he be carried, he cannot escape. And if he be carried, then the customs men may discover what the box contain. Thus, in fine, if he escape not on shore tonight, or before dawn, there will be the whole day lost to him. We may then arrive in time. For if he escape not at night, we shall come on him in the daytime, box up and at our mercy. For he dare not be his true self, awake and visible, lest he be discovered." There was no more to be said, so we waited in patience until the dawn, at which time we might learn more from Mrs. Harker. Early this morning we listened, with breathless anxiety, for her response in her trance. The hypnotic stage was even longer in coming than before, and when it came, the time remaining until full sunrise was so short that we began to despair. Van Helsing seemed to throw his whole soul into the effort. At last, in obedience to his will, she made reply. "All is dark. I hear lapping water, level with me, and some creaking as of wood on wood." She paused, and the red sun shot up. We must wait till tonight. And so it is that we are travelling towards Galatz in an agony of expectation. We are due to arrive between 2 and 3 in the morning, but already at Bucharest we are 3 hours late, so we cannot possibly get in till well after sunup. Thus we shall have 2 more hypnotic messages from Mrs. Harker. Either or both may possibly throw more light on what is happening. Later. Sunset has come and gone. Fortunately, it came at a time when there was no distraction, for had it occurred whilst we were at a station, we might not have secured the necessary calm and isolation. Mrs. Harker yielded to the hypnotic influence even less rapidly than this morning. I am in fear that her power of reading the Count's sensations may die away, just when we want it most. It seems to me that her imagination is beginning to work. Whilst she has been in the trance hitherto, she has confined herself to the simplest of facts. If this goes on, it may ultimately mislead us. If I thought that the Count's power over her would die away equally with her power of knowledge, it would be a happy thought, but I am afraid that it may not be so. When she did speak, her words were enigmatical. "Something is going out. I can feel it pass me like a cold wind. I can hear far off confused sounds, as of men talking in strange tongues, fierce falling water, and the howling of wolves." She stopped, and a shudder ran through her, increasing in intensity for a few seconds, till at the end she shook as though in a palsy. She said no more, even in answer to the professor's imperative questioning. When she woke from the trance, she was cold and exhausted and languid, but her mind was all alert. She could not remember anything, but asked what she had said. When she was told, she pondered over it deeply for a long time and in silence. 30 October, 7 a.m. We are near Galatz now, and I may not have time to write later. Sunrise this morning was anxiously looked for by us all. Knowing of the increasing difficulty of procuring the hypnotic trance, Van Helsing began his passes earlier than usual. They produced no effect, however, until the regular time, when she yielded with a still greater difficulty, only a minute before the sun rose. The professor lost no time in his questioning. Her answer came with equal quickness. "All is dark. I hear water swirling by, level with my ears, and the creaking of wood on wood. cattle low far off. There is another sound, a queer one, like... She stopped and grew white, and whiter still. Go on, speak, I command you, said Van Helsing in an agonized voice. At the same time, there was despair in his eyes, for the risen sun was reddening even Mrs. Harker's pale face. She opened her eyes, and we all started as she said, sweetly and seemingly with the utmost unconcern, "Oh, Professor, why ask me to do what you know I can't? I don't remember anything." Then, seeing the look of amazement on our faces, she said, turning from one to the other with a troubled look, "What have I said? What have I done? I know nothing, only that I was lying here, half asleep, and heard you say, 'Go on, speak, I command you.' It seems so funny to hear you order me about as if I were a bad child." "Oh, Madam Mina," he said sadly, "it is proof, if proof be needed, of how I love and honor you, when a word for your good, spoken more earnest than ever, can seem so strange because it is to order her whom I am proud to obey." The whistles are sounding. We are nearing Galatz. We are on fire with anxiety and eagerness.
Mina Harker's Journal. 30th October. Mr. Morris took me to the hotel where our rooms had been ordered by telegraph, he being the one who could best be spared, since he does not speak any foreign language. The forces were distributed much as they had been at Varna, except that Lord Godalming went to the Vice-Consul, as his rank might serve as an immediate guarantee of some sort to the official, we being in extreme hurry. Jonathan and the 2 doctors went to the shipping agent to learn particulars of the arrival of the Tsarina Catherine. Later. Lord Godalming has returned. The consul is away, and the vice-consul sick, so the routine work has been attended to by a clerk. He was very obliging, and offered to do anything in his power.
Jonathan Harker's Journal, 30th of October. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, and I called on Messrs. Mackenzie and Steinkopf, the agents of the London firm of Hapgood. They had received a wire from London in answer to Lord Godalming's telephone request, asking them to show us any civility in their power. They were more than kind and courteous, and took us at once on board the Tsarina Catherine, which lay at anchor out on the river harbour. There we saw the captain, Donaldson by name, who told us of his voyage. He said that in all his life he had never had so favourable a run. "Man," he said, "but it made us afeard, for we expect that we should have had to pay for it with some rare piece of ill luck, so as to keep up with the average. It's no canny to run fra London to the Black Sea with your wind ahint you, as though the Dale himself were bawling on your sail for all his own purpose. And at the time we could no speer a thing. Gin we were nigh a ship, or a port, or a headland, the fog fell on us and travelled wi' us, till when we were after it had lifted and we looked about at the Dale a thing we could see. We ran by Gibraltar without a being able to signal, until we get to the Dardanelles and had to wait to get our permit to pass, and never were within hail of aught. At first I inclined to slack off sail and beat about till the fog was lifted, but whiles I thought that if the Dale was minded to get us into the Black Sea quick, he was like to do it whether we would or no. If we had a quick voyage, then it would be no to our miscredit with the owners, or no hurt to our traffic, and the old man who had served his own purpose would be decently grateful for us to no hindering him." This mixture of simplicity and cunning, of superstition and commercial reasoning, aroused Van Helsing, who said, "Mein friend, that devil is more clever than he is thought by some, and he know when he meet his match." The skipper was not displeased with the compliment, and went on. "When we got past the Bosphorus, the men began to grumble. Some of them, the Romanians, came and asked me to heave overboard a big box which had been put on board by a queer-looking old man just before we had started for London. I had seen 'em speer at the fellow and put out their 2 fingers when they saw him to guard against the evil eye. Man, but the superstition of foreigners is perfectly ridiculous. I sent them about their business pretty quick, but just after a fog had closed in on us, I felt a wee bit as they didn't add something, though I wouldn't say it was again the bit box. Well, on we went, and the fog didn't let up for 5 days. I just let the wind carry us, for the devil wanted to get somewhere. Well, he would just fetch it up all right. And if he didn't, well, we'd keep a sharp lookout anyhow. Sure enough, We had a fair way and deep water all the time, and 2 days ago, when the morning sun came through the fog, we found ourselves just in the river opposite Galatz. The Romanians were wild, and wanted me right or wrong to take out the box and fling it in the river. I had to argue with them about it with a handspike, and when the last of 'em rose off the deck, with his head in his hand, I had convinced him that, evil eye or no evil eye, the property and the trust of my owners were better in my hands than in the river Danube. They had, mind you, taken the box on the deck ready to fling in, and as it was marked Galatz via Varna, I thought I'd well let it lie till we discharged in the port and got rid of it altogether. We didn't do much clearing that day and had to remain the next at anchor. But in the morning, brow and early, an hour before sun-up, a man came aboard with an order, written to him from England, to receive a box marked for one Count Dracula. Sure enough, the matter was one ready to his hand. He had his papers arrayed, and glad I was to be rid of the damn thing, for I was beginning myself to feel uneasy at it. If the deal did have any luggage aboard the ship, I'm thinking it was nigh other than that same. "What was the name of the man who took it?" asked Dr. Van Helsing with restrained eagerness. "I'll be telling you quick," he answered, and stepped down to his cabin, producing a receipt signed Emanuel Hildesheim. Bergenstrasse 16 was the address. We found out that this was all the captain knew, so with thanks we came away. We found Hildesheim in his office, a Hebrew of rather the Adolphi type, with a nose like a sheep and a fez. His arguments were pointed with specie, we doing the punctuation, and with a little bargaining he told us what he knew. This turned out to be simple but important. He had received a letter from Mr. Deville of London, telling him to receive, if possible, before sunrise so as to avoid customs, a box which would arrive at Galatz in the Tsarina Catherine. This he was to give in charge to a certain Petrov Skinsky, who dealt with Slovaks who traded down the river to the port. He had been paid for his work by an English banknote which had been duly cashed for gold at the Danube International Bank. When Skinsky had come to him, he had taken him to the ship and handed over the box so as to save porterage. That was all he knew. We then sought for Skinsky, but were unable to find him. One of his neighbours, who did not seem to bear him any affection, said that he had gone away 2 days before, no one knew whither. This was corroborated by his landlord, who had received by messenger the key of the house together with the rent due, in English money. This had been between 10 and 11 o'clock last night. We were at a standstill again. Whilst we were talking, one came running and breathlessly gasped out that the body of Skinsky had been found inside the wall of the churchyard of St. Peter, and that the throat had been torn open as if by some wild animal. Those we had been speaking with ran off to see the horror, the women crying out, "This is the work of a Slovak!" We hurried away lest that we should have been in some way drawn into the affair, and so detained. As we came home we could arrive at no definite conclusion. We were all convinced that the box was on its way, by water, to somewhere, but where that might be we would have to discover. With heavy hearts we came home to the hotel to Mina. When we met together, the first thing was to consult as to taking Mina again into our confidence. Things are getting desperate, and it is at least a chance, though a hazardous one. As a preliminary step, I was released from my promise to her.
Mina Harker's journal.
30th October, evening. They were so tired and worn out and dispirited that there was nothing to be done till they had had some rest, so I asked them all to lie down for half an hour whilst I should enter everything up to the moment. I feel so grateful to the man who invented the traveller's typewriter, and to Mr. Morris for getting this one for me. I should have felt quite astray doing the work if I had to write with a pen. It is all done. Poor dear, dear Jonathan, what he must have suffered, what he must be suffering now. He lies on the sofa, hardly seeming to breathe, and his whole body appears in collapse. His brows are knit, his face is drawn with pain. Poor fellow! Maybe he is thinking, and I can see his face all wrinkled up with the concentration of his thoughts. Oh, if I could only help it all! I shall do what I can. I have asked Dr. Van Helsing, and he has got me all the papers that I have not yet seen. Whilst they are resting, I shall go over all carefully, and perhaps I may arrive at some conclusion. I shall try to follow the Professor's example, and think without prejudice on the facts before me. I do believe that under God's providence I have made a discovery. I shall get the maps and look over them. I am more than ever sure that I am right. My new conclusion is ready, so I shall get our party together and read it. They can judge it. It is well to be accurate, and every minute is precious.
Mina Harker's memorandum entered in her journal.
Ground of inquiry. Count Dracula's problem is to get back to his own place. A. He must be brought back by someone. This is evident, for had he power to move himself as he wished, he could go either as man or wolf or bat in some other way. He evidently fears discovery or interference, in the state of helplessness in which he must be, confined as he is between dawn and sunset in his wooden box. B. How is he to be taken? Here a process of exclusions may help us. By road, by rail, by water. 1. By road. There are endless difficulties, especially in leaving the city. X. There are people, and people are curious and investigate. A hint, a surmise, a doubt as to what might be in the box would destroy him. There are, or there may be, customs and octroi offices to pass. Z. His pursuers might follow. This is his highest fear, and in order to prevent his being betrayed, he has repelled, so far as he can, even his victim, me. 2. By rail. There is no one in charge of the box. It would have to take its chance of being delayed, and delay would be fatal with enemies on the track. True, he might escape at night, but what would he be if left in a strange place with no refuge that he could fly to? This is not what he intends, and he does not mean to risk it. 3. By water. Here is the safest way in one respect, but with most danger in another. On the water he is powerless except at night. Even then he can only summon fog and storm and snow, and his wolves. But were he wrecked, the living water would engulf him, helpless, and he would indeed be lost. He could have the vessel drive to land, but if it were unfriendly land, wherein he was not free to move, his position would still be desperate. We know from the record that he was on the water, so what we have to do is to ascertain what water. The first thing is to realize exactly what he has done as yet. We may then get a light on what his task is to be. Firstly, we must differentiate between what he did in London as part of his general plan of action, when he was pressed for moments and had to arrange as best he could. Secondly, we must see, as well as we can surmise it from the facts we know of, what he has done here. As to the first, he evidently intended to arrive at Galatz, and sent invoice to Varna to deceive us, lest we should ascertain his means of exit from England. His immediate and sole purpose then was to escape. The proof of this is the letter of instructions sent to Emanuel Hildesheim to clear and take away the box before sunrise. There is also the instruction to Petrov Skinsky. These we must only guess at, but there must have been some letter or message, since Skinsky came to Hildesheim. That so far his plans were successful, we know. The Tsarina Catherine made a phenomenally quick journey, so much so that Captain Donelson's suspicions were aroused. But his superstition, united with his canniness, played the Count's game for him, and he ran with his favouring wind through fogs, and all till he brought up blindfold at Galatz. That the Count's arrangements were well made has been proved. Hildesheim cleared the box, took it off, and gave it to Skinsky. Skinsky took it, and here we lose the trail. We only know that the box is somewhere on the water, moving along. The customs and the octroi, if there be any, have been avoided. Now we come to what the Count must have done after his arrival on land at Galatz. The box was given to Skinsky before sunrise. At sunrise the Count could appear in his own form. Here we ask why Skinsky was chosen at all to aid in the work. In my husband's diary, Skinsky is mentioned as dealing with the Slovaks who trade down the river to the port, and the man's remark that the murder was the work of a Slovak showed the general feeling against his class. The Count wanted isolation. My surmise is this, that in London the Count decided to get back to his castle by water as the most safe and secret way. He was brought from the castle by Zgani, and probably they delivered their cargo to Slovaks who took the boxes to Varna, for there they were shipped to London. Thus the Count had knowledge of the persons who could arrange this service. When the box was on land, before sunrise or after sunset, he came out from his box, met Skinsky, and instructed him what to do as to arranging the carriage of the box up some river. When this was done, and he knew that all was in train, he blotted out his traces, as he thought, by murdering his agent. I have examined the map, and find that the river most suitable for the Slovaks to have ascended is either the Pruth or the Sereth. I read in the typescript that in my trance I heard cows low and water swirling level with my ears, and the creaking of wood. The Count in his box, then, was on a river in an open boat, propelled probably either by oars or poles, for the banks are near, and it is working against stream. There would be no such if floating downstream. Of course, it may not be either the Sereth or the Pruth, but we may possibly investigate further. Now, of these two, the Pruth is the more easily navigated, but the Sereth is, at Fundu, joined by the Bistritza, which runs up round the Borgo Pass. The loop it makes is manifestly as close to Dracula's castle as can be got by water. Mina Harker's journal continued. When I had done reading, Jonathan took me in his arms and kissed me. The others kept shaking me by both hands, and Dr. Van Helsing said, "Our dear Madam Mina is once more our teacher. Her eyes have been where we were blinded. Now we are on the track once again, and this time we may succeed. Our enemy is at his most helpless, and if we can come on him by day on the water, our task will be over. He has a start, but he is powerless to hasten, as he may not leave this box, lest those who carry him may suspect. For them to suspect would be to prompt them to throw him in the stream where he perish. This he knows, and will not. Now, men, to our council of war, for here and now we must plan what each and all shall do." "I shall get a steam launch and follow him," said Lord Godalming. "And I, horses to follow on the bank, lest by chance he land," said Mr. Morris. "Good," said the Professor. "Both good. But neither must go alone. There must be force to overcome force if need be. The Slovak is strong and rough, and he carries rude arms." All the men smiled, for amongst them they carried a small arsenal. Said Mr. Morris, "I have brought some Winchesters. They are pretty handy in a crowd, and there may be wolves. The Count, if you remember, took some other precautions. He made some requisitions on others that Mrs. Harker could not quite hear or understand. We must be ready at all points." Dr. Seward said, "I think I had better go with Quincy. We have been accustomed to hunt together, and we two, well armed, will be a match for whatever may come along. You must not be alone, Art. It may be necessary to fight the Slovaks, and a chance thrust, for I don't suppose those fellows carry guns, would undo all our plans. There must be no chances this time. We shall not rest until the Count's head and body have been separated, and we are sure that he cannot reincarnate." He looked at Jonathan as he spoke, and Jonathan looked at me. I could see that the poor dear was torn about in his mind. Of course he wanted to be with me, but then the boat service would most likely be the one which would destroy the vampire. Why did I hesitate to write the word? He was silent a while, and during his silence Dr. Van Helsing spoke. "Friend Jonathan, this is to you for twice reasons. First, because you are young and brave and can fight, and all energies may be needed at the last. And again, that it is your right to destroy him. That which has wrought such woe to you and yours. Be not afraid for Madam Mina. She will be my care, if I may. I am old, my legs are not so quick to run as once, and I am not used to ride so long or to pursue as need be, or to fight with lethal weapons. But I can be of other service. I can fight another way, and I can die if need be as well as younger men. Now let me say that what I would is this. While you, my Lord Godalming, and friend Jonathan go in your so swift little steamboat up the river, and whilst John and Quincy guard the bank where perchance he might be landed, I will take Madam Mina right into the heart of the enemy's country. Whilst the old fox is tied in his box, floating on the running stream whence he cannot escape to land, where he dares not raise the lid of his coffin-box, lest his Slovak carriers should in fear leave him to perish, we shall go in the track where Jonathan went, from Bistritz over the Borgo, and find our way to the castle of Dracula. Here Madam Mina's hypnotic power will surely help, and we shall find our way, all dark and unknown otherwise, after the first sunrise when we are near that fateful place. There is much to be done, and other places to be made sanctify, so that the nest of vipers be obliterated." Here Jonathan interrupted him hotly. Do you mean to say, Professor Van Helsing, that you would bring Mina, in her sad case and tainted as she is with that devil's illness, right into the jaws of his death-trap? Not for the world, not for heaven or hell." He became almost speechless for a minute, and then went on. "Do you know what the place is? Have you seen that awful den of hellish infamy, with the very moonlight alive with grisly shapes, and every speck of dust that whirls in the wind a devouring monster and embryo? Have you felt the vampire's lips upon your throat?" Here he turned to me, and as his eyes lit on my forehead, he threw up his arms with a cry, "Oh, my God! What have we done to have this terror upon us?" And he sank down on the sofa in a collapse of misery. The Professor's voice, as he spoke in clear, sweet tones, which seemed to vibrate in the air, calmed us all. "Oh, my friend, it is because I would save Madam Mina from that awful place that I would go. God forbid that I should take her into that place. There is work, wild work, to be done before that place can be purified. Remember that we are in terrible straits. If the Count escape us this time, and he is strong and subtle and cunning, he may choose to sleep him for a century, and then in time our dear one," he took my hand, "would come to him to keep him company, and would be as those others that you, Jonathan, saw. You have told us of their gloating lips. You heard their ribald laugh as they clutched the moving bag that the Count threw to them. You shudder, and well may it be. Forgive me that I make you so much pain, but it is necessary. My friend, is it not a dire need for that which I am giving, possibly my life? If it were that any one went into that place to stay, it is I who would have to go to keep them company." "Do as you will," said Jonathan, with a sob that shook him all over. "We are in the hands of God." Later. Oh, it did me good to see the way that these brave men worked. How can women help loving men when they are so earnest and so true and so brave? And, too, it made me think of the wonderful power of money. What can it not do when basely used? I felt so thankful that Lord Godalming is rich, and both he and Mr. Morris, who also has plenty of money, are willing to spend it so freely. For if they did not, our expedition could not start, either so promptly or so well equipped, as it will within another hour. It is not 3 hours since it was arranged what part each of us was to do, and now Lord Godalming and Jonathan have a lovely steam launch, with steam up ready to start at a moment's notice. Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris have 6 good horses well appointed. We have all the maps and appliances of various kinds that can be had. Professor Van Helsing and I are to leave by the 11:40 train to-night for Veresti, where we are to get a carriage to drive to the Borgo Pass. We are bringing a good deal of ready money, as we are to buy a carriage and horses. We shall drive ourselves, for we have no one whom we can trust in the matter. The Professor knows something of a great many languages, so we shall get on all right. We have all got arms, even for me a large bore revolver. Jonathan would not be happy unless I was armed like the rest. Alas, I cannot carry one arm that the rest do. The scar on my forehead forbids that. Dear Dr. Van Helsing comforts me by telling me that I am fully armed as there may be wolves. The weather is getting colder every hour, and there are snow flurries which come and go as warnings. Later. It took all my courage to say good-bye to my darling. We may never meet again. Courage, Mina. The Professor is looking at you keenly. His look is a warning. There must be no tears now, unless it may be that God will let them fall in gladness.
Jonathan Harker's Journal. October 30th, night. I am writing this in the light from the furnace door of the steam launch. Lord Godalming is firing up. He is an experienced hand at the work, and has for years a launch of his own on the Thames and another on the Norfolk Broads. Regarding our plans, we finally decided that Mina's guess was correct, and that if any waterway was chosen for the Count's escape back to his castle, the Sereth, and then the Bistritza at its junction would be the one. We took it, and somewhere about the 47th degree, north latitude, would be the place chosen for crossing the country between the river and the Carpathians. We have no fear in running at good speed up the river at night. There is plenty of water, and the banks are wide enough apart to make steaming, even in the dark, easy enough. Lord Godalming tells me to sleep for a while, as it is enough for the present for one to be on watch. But I cannot sleep. How can I, with the terrible danger hanging over my darling, and her going out into that awful place? My only comfort is that we are in the hands of God. Only for that faith it would be easier to die than to live, and so be quit of all the trouble. Mr. Morris and Dr. Seward were off on their long ride before we started. They are to keep up the right bank far enough off to get on higher lands, where they can see a good stretch of river and avoid the following of its curves. They have, for the first stages, 2 men to ride and lead their spare horse, 4 in all so as not to excite curiosity. When they dismiss the men, which will be shortly, they will themselves look after the horses. It may be necessary for us to join forces, if so they can mount our whole party. One of the saddles has a movable horn and can be easily adapted for Mina if required. It is a wild adventure that we are on. Here, as we are rushing along through the darkness, with the cold from the river seeming to rise up and strike us, with all the mysterious voices of the night around us, it all comes home. We seem to be drifting into unknown places in unknown ways, into a whole world of dark and dreadful things. Godalming is shutting the furnace door. 31st of October. Still hurrying along. The day has come and Godalming is sleeping. I am on watch. The morning is bitterly cold. The furnace heat is grateful, though we have heavy fur coats. As yet we have passed only a few open boats, but none of them had on board any box or package of anything like the size of the one we seek. The men were scared every time we turned our electric lamp on them, and fell on their knees and prayed. 1st of November, evening. No news all day. We have found nothing of the kind we seek. We have now passed into the Bistritza, and if we are wrong in our surmise, our chance is gone. We have overhauled every boat, big and little. Early this morning, one crew took us for a government boat and treated us accordingly. We saw this as a way of smoothing matters, so at Fundu, where the Bistritza runs into the Sereth, we got a Romanian flag which we now fly conspicuously. With every boat we have overhauled since then, this trick has succeeded. We have had every deference shown to us, and not once any objection to whatever we chose to ask or do. Some of the Slovaks tell us that a big boat passed them going at more than usual speed, as she had had a double crew on board. This was before they came to Fundu, so they could not tell us whether the boat turned into the Bistritza or continued on up the Sereth. At Fundu we could not hear of any such boat, so she must have passed there in the night. I am feeling very sleepy. The cold is perhaps beginning to tell upon me, and nature must have rest sometime. Godalming insists that he shall keep the first watch. God bless him for all his goodness to poor dear Mina and me. 2nd of November, morning. It is broad daylight. That good fellow would not wake me. He says it would have been a sin to, for I slept so peacefully and was forgetting my trouble. It seems brutally selfish of me to have slept so long, and let him watch all night, but he was quite right. I am a new man this morning, and, as I sit here and watch him sleeping, I can do all that is necessary both as to minding the engine, steering, and keeping watch. I can feel that my strength and energy are coming back to me. I wonder where Mina is now, and Van Helsing. They should have got to Veretzi around noon on Wednesday. It would take them some time to get the carriage and horses, so if they had started and travelled hard, they would be about now at the Borgo Pass. God guide and help them. I am afraid to think what may happen. If we could only go faster. But we cannot. The engines are throbbing and doing their utmost. I wonder how Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris are getting on. There seem to be endless streams running down from the mountains into the river, but none of them are very large. At present, at all events, though they are terrible doubtless in winter and when the snow falls, the horsemen may not have met much obstruction. I hope that before we get to Strasbourg we may see them, for if by that time we have not overtaken the Count, it may be necessary to take counsel together what to do next.
Dr. Seward's Diary, 2 November. 3 days on the road. No news, and no time to write it if there had been, for every moment is precious. We have had only the rest needful for the horses, but we are both bearing it wonderfully. Those adventurous days of ours are turning up useful. We must push on. We shall never feel happy till we get the launch in sight again. 3 November. We heard at Fundu that the launch had gone up the Bistritza. I wish it wasn't so cold. There are signs of snow coming, and if it falls heavy it will stop us. In such case we must get a sledge and go on Russian fashion. 4 November. Today we heard of the launch having been detained by an accident when trying to force a way up the rapids. The Slovak boats get up all right by aid of rope and steering with knowledge. Some went up only a few hours before. Godalming is an amateur fitter himself, and evidently it was he who put the launch in trim again. Finally, they got up the rapids all right with local help and are off on the chase afresh. I fear that the boat is not any better for the accident. The peasantry tell us that after she got up smooth water again, she kept stopping every now and again so long as she was in sight. We must push on harder than ever. Our help may be wanted soon.
Mina Harker's journal.
31st October. Arrived at Veresti at noon. The professor tells me that this morning at dawn he could hardly hypnotize me at all, and that all I could say was, dark and quiet. He is off now buying a carriage and horses. He says that he will later on try to buy additional horses, so that we may be able to change them on the way. We have something more than 70 miles before us. The country is lovely and most interesting. If only we were under different conditions, how delightful it would be to see it all. If Jonathan and I were driving through it alone, what a pleasure it would be! To stop and see people, and learn something of their life, and to fill our minds and memories with all the colour and picturesqueness of the whole wild, beautiful country, and the quaint people. But alas! Later. Dr. Van Helsing has returned. He has got the carriage and horses. We are to have some dinner and to start in an hour. The landlady is putting us up a huge basket of provisions. It seems enough for a company of soldiers. The professor encourages her, and whispers to me that it may be a week before we can get any food again. He has been shopping too, and has sent home such a wonderful lot of fur coats and wraps, and all sorts of warm things. There will not be any chance of our being cold. We shall soon be off. I am afraid to think what may happen to us. We are truly in the hands of God. He alone knows what may be, and I pray him, with all the strength of my sad and humble soul, that he will watch over my beloved husband, that whatever may happen, Jonathan may know that I loved him and honoured him more than I can say, and that my latest and truest thought will be always for him.
So, one chapter left. I know, it's awesome. So, there are a couple of things that I thought you might want to know, but I didn't think it was worth revealing them before the chapter. One is the traveler's typewriter that Mina talks about Quincy having bought her. It would have been expensive, and it's hard to identify exactly what kind of typewriter she is talking about, because there were several. None of them are called a traveler's typewriter, and nobody seems to have officially called them that before. But I put a picture of one up there. You can see it would still have taken quite a bit of muscle to have carted this sucker around. But Mina is, of course, traveling with some strapping young men, so that may not have been a problem for her. The other thing is Jonathan Harker having referred to one of the solicitors they meet as a Hebrew of the Adelphi type. Now, this is interesting. The Adelphi Theatre was a theatre in London. I think it's still there. And it was famous for having produced a play called The Wandering Jew in the 1870s. Now, for those of you who don't know the story of The Wandering Jew, this is a medieval story. It's almost like, if you're Jewish, it's like medieval midrash. It's a story that grew up that isn't a biblical story, but it's based on a Bible story. And it's this idea that when Jesus was on his way to his crucifixion, there was a Jewish man in the crowd. It varies. He's a shoemaker. He's the doorman to Pontius Pilate's place. It changes. And he taunts Jesus. And for this, he is cursed to wander the globe forever. And this story pops up all over medieval mystery plays and all over and into the 1800s when this play is produced. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So fine, you can write that off and go, well, it's a stereotype, it's of its time, it's, anti-Semitism is not a huge surprise, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is when Bram Stoker gets really interesting. John Irving is the actor that Bram Stoker worked for. John Irving produced a play by the writer of The Wandering Jew that was more popular than The Wandering Jew. And the guy who wrote The Wandering Jew never dealt with the fact that it was possible, that it was Irving's production and Irving himself that made that play popular over his writing. He had some success. The Wandering Jew was actually a pretty big hit for the Adelphi Theater that year. But he had this interesting kind of cantankerous relationship with Stoker. Not with Stoker, with Irving, Stoker's employer. So this relationship would not have been lost on him. And as a consequence, the fact that he's letting Jonathan make kind of a remark that sounds like a stereotype and is referring to a stereotype is also in a way kind of making a dig at the author who didn't like Irving, the author of the Wandering Jew play, who didn't like Irving because of a different play. And it's kind of this dig, and that really successful play that Irving did, that's not what you're going to be remembered for. You're going to be remembered for the Wandering Jew that you did at the Adelphi. So it is an interesting and multi-layered kind of stereotyping, vague anti-Semitic thing. Because the interesting thing is he doesn't actually say anything particularly negative about the lawyer. He's a lawyer. What are you going to do? Stoker is such an interesting writer. He lets Mina be kind of a typical Victorian female without being typically a typical Victorian female. He lets people say things that are of the time when it comes to stereotypes and things like that without actually being completely stereotypical, like the way that he talks about all the workers. All of the guys who carry the boxes for Dracula, complaining about not having gotten tipped well because it was really thirsty work. And the way that they wanted to get tipped, they wanted to have a beer. Buy me a beer, I won't complain about how hard the work was. And that couldn't not have been a stereotype at the time as well. But he does it in such a way that it's hard to take offense. The guys are funny, the guys are smart, they're paying attention, and they give the main characters vital information. All of these secondary characters, because they're the ones who our main characters write down about, so they'd have to be useful. They all give useful information. They're all of use to the story. And it's kind of interesting. And so that's it. While you guys were listening to the book, I was able to find out that the book my husband read that I'd been talking about is called Switch by Chip Heath, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. And I think that's it. The shop is open. There's t-shirts and mugs and all sorts of stuff that say "What would Madame Defarge knit?" and CraftLit eye candy for your ears and all sorts of goody goodness. And all of those links can be found on the show notes at craftlit.com. Wow, one more chapter of Dracula. Well, have a great week while you wait. I hope to have a great week too, and I will talk to you very soon. Have a great one. Bye. Please remember to support the people who support CraftLit. Visit knitcircus.com and sign up for your free e-newsletter. And What Would Madame Defarge Knit? A new book of knit and crochet patterns coming to you from the CraftLit family. And please visit the blogs and sites of CraftLit supporters. Those links can be found in the sidebar of the show notes. The show notes can be found at craftlit.com. CraftLit can also be accessed by its own Android and iPhone application. You can purchase it at the iPhone or iTouch application store, or you can subscribe free at iTunes. CraftLit is made possible by the generous support of its listeners, and for that, I am truly grateful. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.